Today's focus will be the importance of the lineage and also importance of or significance of this particular lineage. I call the ear whisper lineage. Ganden Nyengyu, sometimes translated as Ganden oral tradition, oral, instead of ear whisper, same word. Yeah, I used to translate hearing because Nyeng means hearing or ear, basically mouth to ear, so oral transmission. So then Gyu means lineage, or sometimes translated tradition. Although Gyu itself means continuation, a synonym for mind, same word, but a different connotation. But this Gyu is a lineage. Lineage means uninterrupted flow coming from the Shakyamuni Buddha and all the way to the present master. That's implied. You itself implied like a river. Like first snow mountain peak, Shakyamuni there, his awakening. Then from there, snow started to melt, all different river formations. Then one river, very pure and narrow river came flow. Then that's a lineage. There are many different lineages, and some of you may familiar with different lineage. So we are focusing on this particular lineage called Ganden Nyengyu, ear whisper lineage of the Mount of Bliss. That's another translation of Ganden. Ganden, there are many meanings as well. Ganden is the monastery's name, which was established by Lama Tsongkhapa, so Ganden Monastery. And also Ganden is the name of the mountain around that monastery. And also Ganden is the paradise or heaven, Tushita heaven. There are lots of connotation, but the literal meaning is joyful, joy or bliss, or Ga means happy, happiness, and so forth. I translate the bliss. We are going into this. This particular lineage is very significant. Before I say anything about this lineage, this is nothing to do with sectarian. This lineage is the best. No, I'm talking about all different lineages, right? Rivers. We not say that this river is the best. No, all leads to the ocean of awakening. It end up same place. Although when we focus, we cannot jump in the two rivers at the same time. No, maybe you can observe the river from the bank here and there before you really jump into. But if you jump into, then you follow or you're supported by all the lineage masters and their realization and what they did and so forth. You are following that river. So we are just speaking on this particular lineage called the ear whisper lineage. I wanted to clarify because nothing to do with the sectarian. Actually, contrarily, completely open-minded. Maybe contrary to some public opinion. We don't want to involve anything to do with Dharma politics, especially this lineage. All the masters only interested in their realization, supported by tremendous compassion. They can't help but putting their entire life into practice. Then came out as awakened beings. Literally awakened beings, their life. One life, one body, that they are talking about. Another was rainbow body. You know, in Gelug and this tradition, they don't use those words and we kept very secret, so to speak. But this has a flavor of the secrecy and the modesty. You will see when we read their poetry or their life story and so forth. We started to have a smell of this particular wandering yogi lineage. So this tradition, this lineage is what His Holiness Dalai Lama follows. And also all my masters, all my teachers. Of course, I have many, many different teachers from different lineage, but the main teachers come from this lineage. So this is a special lineage of the Gelug school. So we have to differentiate from the school. We have a four main school, right? In Tibetan Buddhism, Gelug, Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, Then we kind of stereotype each school and this and that. We like to categorize this. Onima is this and Geru is this, those things. See if you can take a moment to let go of these stereotypes. Okay, lineage is completely different deal. Okay, lineage is not the school. Lineage consists of all the realized masters' realization. They put in that lineage, river, dump into the river. Each master to master, they put their practice so that like a body of the practices and teaching and method, realization and literature, everything in there and carried by the flow of river. Then it came to our master, then came to us. So that's the lineage connotation, different from school. That's important to know. Also, Buddha said, I can only show you the way, teach the way. Way means method. You have to practice yourself. Does that make sense? If Buddha had the power to awaken us, then he had done that a long time ago. But we have to put into our practice. That makes human teacher, human masters very precious, very important. Because now we cannot access the Buddha himself, but the teacher is like sometimes I use this magnifying glass. All these Buddha's teaching and concentrate and then burn the students our delusion of the heart and burn. So very powerful. This is one thing we need to be aware of. Importance of the teacher, significant. The teacher is in the sense that everything is a connection to the lineage. So then this particular teacher called the root teacher, if that teacher touches your heart directly, or through whom we can hear about even single word of Dharma. See, if we think about our life when we met Dharma, maybe you heard from, books and that, but the teacher is the one who teaches us the meaning of that word. So precious. What I meant is a river, right? At that one point, you meet a teacher. And then that teacher carry the previous or the entire rivers. Then now your turn to take that one. Then you take responsibility, then move on. That's in Tibetan Buddhism very important to recognize in the West. See if we can kind of let go of this feeling of this what you call authority figure and this and that, this kind of baggage we carry. See if we can let go of that, just see the real meaning of this lineage, appreciation of this uninterrupted current of teaching and realizations. Without the guru, there's no path. Without the lineage, there's no guru. So nothing happens without a guru. In that sense, everything comes from the teacher. How do we individual make progress the path? So that is through the connection to the teacher, through the connection to the lineage. Just from the bookshelf or at the bookstore or something like that, you cannot make connection. Even you cannot hear the teaching. We are talking about walking the path, right? But that teacher could be the who walked the path farther than you. I mean, that teacher it be the in a lineage. Then also that teacher can hold you as a dearest. Or only teacher's concern is our spiritual development, nothing else. So anyway, that's one thing I wanted to say. Importance of a lineage and a teacher. And also we are a big part of the current of that river and the lineage. Now we're going to go into this awakened stories. Namtaru. That's a Tibetan word. Nam, M-A-M, T-A-R. Got Namtaru. That's the literal translation, the complete liberation. Liberation, complete freedom. but this refers to the biography or life stories of Awakened One. Liberation life story. This the book, the translation of some of our lineage masters. So this is a really unique contribution when this came out, because before nobody knew, and also we had this idea about this confusion between sects and schools and stereotyping like a certain schools. Okay, so when this came out, what Janice Wells wanted to do, actually Lama Yeshe wanted to do, is we have yogic current, this ear whisper lineage. All those masters woke up their lifetime. They achieved the rainbow body through the method which Lama Tsongkhapa taught. Actually, that I want to go into that, because especially when we enter tantric practice, there are many uniqueness and also flavors you started to feel. One uniqueness of this lineage is Lama Tsongkhapa's contribution to the tantric practice. He created, or he explained very clearly, the means to practice tantra or attain the enlightenment in one lifetime through highest yoga tantra. That's a unique contribution. Around Lama Tsongkhapa's time, we have to talk a little bit about the historical background as well. There are lots of confusion, and the tantric practice was done here and there, but there's no really coherent tantric practice. How to use tantric practice as a method to attain awakening in this lifetime. So what Lama Tsongkhapa did was that he explained it very clearly based on the Indian sources, not just rely on all this Tibetan interpretation of that. Then he talked with Manjushri directly. Initially, he was not able to communicate with Manjushri, Awakened One, but he had an interpreter initially, Lama Umapa, his name. But eventually he was able to communicate with him, then ask a question and so forth. Anyway, so this Ganden, ear whisper lineage, have that flavors. Strong emphasis on the practice tantra through the stage of the path, step by step, and how to win our victory in this lifetime. Around that time, Lama Tsongkhapa's time, like 14th century, 15th century, around that time. Actually, Renaissance was happening in Tibet that time. Tibetan version of Renaissance. Lama Tsongkhapa was considered to be a reformer before so much confusions and tantric practice just get into all this indulgence. They didn't work. That didn't lead to the awakening. Even they tried to pretend to be a tantric practitioner. Then Lama Tsongkhapa's role was to really clarify and kind of clean up the mess, so to speak. Around that time, so he asked the Manjushri how many students I should take to this long retreat. Then he told Lama Tsongkhapa, first disciple is called Jambe Gyatso. This is very famous. Tokuden Jambe Gyatso, that's the first one. And he translated here, first of the disciple. The next one is Baso Chogen, Baso Choki Gelsen, that's the second one. Then third one is Tupchen Choki Dorje. Then fourth one is Gelwa Ensapa, very important. All are important for lineage. Then the next Sangye Yeshe, that's the fifth one, Ketup Sangye Yeshe. Then sixth one is Lobsang Chogen. That is the first Panchen Lama. We are reading his poetries, beautiful poetries. Okay, so those are 6 of them listed here from Ear Whisper lineage. It tells how important to know their life story as well as many things. Life story itself is not only inspiration, but by reading life story, we can learn so much, very instructional. what the kind of practice they did, which teacher did they have, what has happened at the time, historically, and so forth. And actually, what did they do to come to awakening? So that's what we want to know. What kind of practice they did, and how did it? Because we are a follower of them. We want to know. Not like observing, oh, this looks nice, it's good, interesting. And maybe that's one way to read the biography, but more like we are quite involved, and inspired. Okay, so that's actually in here. So finally, we're going to get into here, but she translated this 6 masters. Yeah, start with Janbei Gyatso, Lord of Accomplished Janbei Gyatso. So that's the first one. Interesting, each master has a little bit of uniqueness, but at the same time common. Right now, I'm just gonna say a few words about when I read this one first. Each master practiced Cho practice, which we practice exactly what we practice, and Mahamudra. So Cho Mahamudra, they call Cho Mahamudra. It's the same thing, and it's overlap, but Cho has a uniqueness of all these other stuff, but same thing, Cho Mahamudra and Lamrim, stage of path we are practicing right now. Everything we are practicing right now. So we are on, in a sense, at least from our side, we have an intention to follow their footstep or river step or whatever. So Cho, Mahamudra, Lamrim, stage of the path, and Lojong, mind training, Tonren, we practice all these things. Plus tantric practice. Yeah, tantric practice. That's the thing. All these stuff, Mahamudra, Cho, and Lojong, mind training, everything support tantric practice. Because tantric practice means this is about awakening in this life with this body, without abandoning this body. Anyway, so that's kind of my punchline. Another thing I noticed reading all these masters, always Vajrayogini appears. So none of the Gelu text, established Gelu text, very secret. Nothing talk about the Dakini appears or Vajrayogini appeared, helped them or those things. But in here, I can see here and there, each master's Vajrayogini appeared and helped them, their practice. For example, first master Janbei Gyatso, right? It said, a spiritual friend came to visit him. Him is Janbei Gyatso, in the appearance of Dorje Nenjolma, which is a Vajrayogi. They all had a visitor. Then at the time of death, many wondrous signs. Next one, the Baso Choki Gelsen, second one, Baso Chogen, we usually said. Of course, he is another great master and talks about the Cho here, direct oral practice instruction and commentary on the profound path of Cho, together with direct detail practice instruction. Anyways, they all practice Cho. They are Chopa. Then here, Vajrayogini also advised him, saying that even while he held the throne of Ganden, he would come to master the detailed practice instruction of the oral tradition. So Vajrayogini told him, even you are kind of now head of this throne of this monastery, you have to come to real deep understanding of this Ganden ear whisper lineage tradition. Yeah, then even toward the end, it said, by Vajrayogini, he became the Lord of eventually possesses a miraculous volume, the complete and extensive practice instruction of the oral traditions. The next one, third one, he's also unique. If you look at him, you can see that very like a yogi like the what you call goatee or whatever. So that's one. And this is the great Siddha, Choki Dorje. He attended Rainbow Body, Siddha. And he said, for example, Vajrayogini prophesies to Basochogi Gelsen, that's the previous master. Then tomorrow, whatever, he prophesied this Chogi Dorje to appear to this lineage. Secrecy was quite important. We learned quite a bit of the flavor of this lineage and also importance of really putting all these teaching into practice and come to realization, importance of the realization. It's not about establishing a big monastery also. Only one person, the last one, Panchen Lama, he was the only one who is founder of the monastery, Tashi Humbo Monastery, Tang district. But all the other masters never established any monastery or carrying big crowds and nothing. This Choki Doje, this wild Shida, he said, and so after that, the great Shida, Choki Doje, having well accomplished all the purposes for remaining in his coarse karmic body, dissolved even this mystic supported body into the clear light and enter into what may be likened to the diamond rainbow body. Okay. So next one, just Ensapa. Ensapa is really significant in terms of Cho lineage. So this Ganden ear whisper lineage of Cho, which we follow, is also called Ensa, this Ensapa, Ensa ear whisper lineage of Cho, because Ensapa was the one who really started to propagate or shared Cho practice in public. Before, very secret. After Ensapa, still not really, but Ensapa was responsible for transmitting this special Cho lineage, which we practice. The Ganden Yavishpa lineage is a practitioner of Tantra. Tantric practice has that's connotations, secrecy, and so forth. You started to have a little smell of this lineage, or even by practicing. So that makes really different when you practice, not just reading the name and the location. No, you can meet with master because their awakened mind is available, right? It's here, omnipresent. The more you open, the more you receive blessing. The more you know about their human life story, like us, human life. But difference is they put their entire life into the practice and prioritize. In other words, took the essence of precious life.
I'm just, when I read about these or hear you talk about them, I feel, of course, inspired by their lives and their stories, and also a bit intimidated, I guess you could say, by the, just they're fervently just practicing all the time, and they do a lot of retreats, and in a way I'm envious.
Actually, my case, I never thought that way, even intimidated, because each one has one's own karma. Then actually brought to this point, even hear the Dharma and meet with all these teachers and the lineage, and now about to dive into or already swimming in this river, that itself is something to appreciate, wow, awe and wonders. How come? Rather than just envy or, oh, how come don't have time to, more rejoice this opportunity and do our best. And then at the time of this, I did my best in this degenerated time, whatever I got. This was precious. And I made my life meaningful. Like I want to die that way, even I was not able to achieve rainbow body or something like that. And also prioritize. The more you practice, more you read their story and inspired, then in our life we come to the point, or not to the point. Every day actually we have a choice and prioritize what's important. Is this something I really want to spend the time with, or Dharma? Priorities start shifting.
I think it's actually really amazing. I I've never been in a practice where there's been a lineage like this or any kind of a background like this. And so for me, it's really powerful, and it's also a little bit confusing and a little bit strange, and sometimes it feels a little bit nebulous. But I think maybe a few weeks or a month ago, you did a meditation, and you talked about having all of the teachers behind us and their hands on our back supporting us, and that was really, really powerful for me. And that was one of the first times that I could really start to grasp this idea of lineage and what it meant and how it was all these practices kind of flowing down to us down the rivers.
And also, we practice more, started to have this flavor. I was talking with the Rasa in Sanskrit. Each practice has its own Rasa flavor of the lineage masters who invested their time to this same practice, kind of attract certain people to the certain practice and the lineage somehow unconsciously or consciously. And so started to get some idea underlying kind of those things are not written, like something I say from my experience. I talked about in terms of Vajrayogini practice as well, but this lineage has that sort of flavor. So you will start to notice. And I know this one or something very familiar. I'm sure in your past lives, one of those past lives or many of your past life, you had a connection to this kind of lineage or attraction to certain aspect of this lineage. Like Buddha said, beginningless of time, we are in here. No beginning, which means we are sometimes yoginis, we are sometimes householders, like that. So it's possible. But I'm kind of glad that you hear because this kind of thing, talking about lineage and guru and so forth, requires maturity on the path. Need a little more exposing this kind of aspect because in the West, very difficult to relate in general, not necessarily Dharma practitioner.
I'm really interested in exploring the lineage masters, and I think it feels to me like a little bit difficult. This always comes up for me as about the women in Buddhism and Tantric Buddhism, especially. I like to read something in addition to all about all the men, and to read about the women because I feel more connected that way. It helps me integrate somehow.
I kind of expected that sort of comment from the Western students. That's why I kind of waited until now to talk about these great masters, which are all monks or monks, and feels like nothing to do with me, householder, I have kids to take care and so forth. But it requires a little bit of maturity to go beyond this veneer of the out forms, so to speak, like a deep down core of who we are, or this deep longing for awakening. So regardless of you are monk or female or male or lived in the 15th century or the 21st century, see if we can find something resonate in common. So that's one of my intentions. I hope at least you have some kind of appreciation for this historical thing as well, in the history. And also you have to know this yoginis and practitioner were there, but not really described. So in terms of female biography, we did a little bit. We are really emphasizing, and from the beginning, day one, Dakinis Whisper, Machi Clapton, our heroines, and also in Dakini journey, we focus on Dakinis and also for female aspect as well. I hope you got my point as well as I honor everybody's feeling. And also guru and so forth. Yeah, this is a process as well. Yeah, process of our cultural, whatever, social background. I think we are the one who make these things alive. It's already alive, but our heart open. We prepare ourselves to open to. Then we understand why the Dharmakaya level all these masters, Dharmakaya and Buddha mind, right? Dharmakaya is formless and omnipresent. And every molecule is made of Dharmakaya, Buddha's awakened mind, which means everywhere. Yeah, omnipresent, beyond the time and space. So if we can read into that level, so there are many ways to read these kind of Namatara, liberation life stories, like outer, inner, and the secret. All these level, always Tantra associated, all these different layers of the meaning. Usually very literal. First, we as a baby practitioner, very literal, and then go into deeper figurative and the deeper meaning and so forth. I was hoping to present this kind of, at least each of us can appreciate the deeper level of this awakened mind level of our masters, just as that. It's not talking about we are ignoring a female life stories, nothing like that. That's just this section or this study as this one. All these masters have this kind of fierceness of longing to go there. You know, this, if you remember the text, three principal aspects of the path. This one was actually composed by Lama Tsongkhapa upon the request of his disciple. His disciple asked him to teach. Then the last paragraph said, when you have grasped the essential point of each of three principal paths as explained, then go into isolation, go into solitude, my child. Make mighty efforts and quickly win your ultimate wish. So this last paragraph, this inspired me when I was young. Before was a very explanation of the stage of the path, one by one stage. Then the last one's kind of punchline. Okay, first you need all this study and contemplate. Now time to meditate, integrate, embody, go to solitude and do that. And then win the, he said, yeah, win your ultimate wish, ultimate longing. So that sort of flavors I feel I taste or I smell, fragrance I smell in this lineages, masters. So just take a moment to rest for 1 minute and you rest in your experience. Today's retreat, the heart of the path, source of all the path, all the awakening, all the realization, actually coming from this snow-melted river of lineage masters, your teacher, along with your confidence, trust, devotion to your capacity or to your guts feeling. And see if you can make some kind of dedication and determination, perhaps a little bit of plan for the future, how I can bring this discussion, which we did today, to my own practice on life, the way of looking at things,